Hello, today is the 1st of December. I would like to, on behalf of myself, Richie 42 and Bill John 28, I would like to wish you all a very happy Christmas and a prosperous New Year from us. Also from the Regimental Museum of the Royal Welsh. Mind you, for a turkey, it's not very happy. But that's another problem. When I was in the regiment, I remember a lot of the wives sort of saying about, my fridge doesn't work, the hinges is not tidy, I haven't got a cooker, and little complaints like this. So I started reading up about wives in the British Army. And there's a fantastic book out there called The Drum. And one paragraph stated that when the soldiers went overseas, they were only allowed to take so many wives with them. And I'll come back to the numbers later. So what some of the wives had to do was to pack the crate or the little box, and they had to parade at the quayside. And then it was only after the name or their husband's name was pulled out of the hat did they know if they were going. And if the name got called out, they got on board ship, the box got put on board ship, the remainder were left there. And what they had to do, they had to go then and find some employment, somewhere to live, and if they couldn't, they lived off the workhouse, or they starved, because there was no such thing as welfare as we know it. Now, the ones that went out with the regiment, and the numbers being, it was 3 wives to every 100, if they were going foreign, and if they were going to South Africa or to Australia, it was 6 wives per 100. So you can see there's not very many proportionalised. And these wives had to do things like help the officers' wives by becoming a maid, a cleaner, looking after them. They'd also have to do the laundry. They'd have to, when the men were in garrison and in the camp, they'd cook the food for them, because there was no such thing as the Army Cement Company, Army Catering Corps. And that was a part of their job. Now, the stipulation was these number of wives per men, but there was nothing laid down for children. So, technically, if you had 10 children, you could take them with you if you got picked. Sounds a bit stupid, but there's logic in it, because when the males got a bit older and started growing up, they went to kindergarten, they went to school, and then they got brought into the army and they became soldiers like their fathers. And their daughters, when they got old enough, helped their mothers doing the service of the laundry, working in the medical centre and stuff like that, and then they married the soldiers, and then they had kids. So it was a circle, and that's how they worked. The women were only allowed 4 pence per week, and they were on half ration. The children were on quarter ration. And whoever the sergeant was of the company or the platoon, he had to make sure that the wives were paid. On a Sunday, while the men were at lunch, the orderly officer, plus the rest of the officer, except the paymaster, had to parade and inspect the living accommodation of the soldiers. And when they inspected the living accommodation, the wives or wife that had cleaned that location had to be there with them to make sure that there was no mishap, nothing dirty, and it could be cleaned straight away. It was compulsory also for the wives to go to church, and they had to be dressed smart in the attire expected for church. Now, as I say about this book, The Drum, Follow the Drum, it's a fantastic book to read. And just sit down, read it, and then next time your wife complains about something, say, lucky you weren't, I wasn't in the army in them days. Right? Because you could have starved, lived on the streets. But that basically, and I got a standing order by her, and I apologise, I've got to read it out because I want to get it straight. Only a certain number of women were allowed to be carried on the ration strength of a regiment, and a marriage or relationship with a soldier had to be blessed by the commanding officer. I knew when I got married in 1969, I had to put a letter into the commanding officer asking permission to get married. Don't know why. I didn't invite him to the wedding. When regiments were at home service, many wives, those approved and unapproved, continued to follow the regiment. But the crunch for those poor souls came when the regiment was earmarked for foreign garrison service. Strangely, there appears to be no limit to the number of children who could accompany the official woman of the regiment. Notice, I said the official woman of the regiment, not Mrs. Like their mothers, the fittest survived, with the boys, when they were old enough, quickly earmarked for the army, and the girls, like their mothers, becoming soldiers' wives. Strangely, it happens today, because in our regiment, a lot of the girls married soldiers. Thing that they used to, I suppose. Standing orders tell us that the number of women permitted to embark with the service companies of a regiment for garrison duty on foreign service are a proportion of 6 to 100 men for India and New South Wales. There's 12 to 100 men. The selection procedure was heartbreaking for those that were to be left behind. No greater proportion of sergeants' wives were to be selected than the sergeants bear to the whole number of men going to service. Those wives remaining with the troops received half ration, and the children a quarter ration, as I've already stated. For that, and the privilege of following the regiment, they were expected to undertake certain duties, which tasks also supplemented their income. The most common task was laundering, washing clothes. Oh look, I lost my place now. When in garrison, they often cooked for the company, cleaning, assisting the surgeon in the regimental hospital, and also acted with the families of the officers. The standing order further stated it been directed that the men are to pay 4 pence per week for washing. This is to be deducted from the pay. Sergeants of squads are to be answerable that the women are paid regularly. The women of the regiment also are to supply their own thread and buttons out of their allowance for making shirts. I hope they weren't KF because they were murder. The surgeon will also take care to provide a careful and proper nurse or nurses in the hospital, and in every respect capable of the confidence and trust and confidentiality reposed in him. The regimental women are subject to military discipline and could be punished or sent home for misconduct. The standing order includes several rules which govern their conduct. The commanding officer or field officer of the regiment will inspect the barrack rooms every Sunday at the men's dinner hour, on which occasion all the officers, except for the paymaster, are to be present, as also such soldiers' wives as were permitted to reside in the barracks or who had the advantage of washing are to be in the room of the men for whom they wash. The women of the regiment are expected to attend divine service, as posh that is, as officers' words. Church service we called it, just let you know. Every Sunday, respectfully and neatly dressed. Each woman who is married, with the consent of the commanding officer, may be allowed a box according to the following dimensions. Now, we know MF4 boxes, how big they were and how much you could get in them. Now, just imagine your wife packing a box to go with you, and these are the dimensions. Following dimensions are 2 feet 2 inches in length, 1 foot 2 inches in breadth, and 1 foot 2 inches in depth. These boxes are to be marked with the owner's name and the number of the regiment, and previous to a march are to be submitted for the inspection of the quartermaster. Mind you, if the quartermaster was fiddler like in Hong Kong, he'd want to open the box and inspect inside and all. Women are not to be permitted to ride on the baggage carts. This last instruction, judging by contemporary prints, was more often than not disregarded. So it wasn't a very, very good life for the wives and female followers. Also, it was stated in the book, but it doesn't state in here, that if your husband died while on foreign service, you were given 2 weeks. And basically, what the 2 weeks were for was to mourn the loss of your husband, but to also find another husband. And you found that your husband's best friend would come up and marry you, because otherwise you were put outside the gates and you had to fend for yourself. And could you imagine if you were in India, if you were in Australia? It's a vast world out there. You're completely out of it. So a lot of the wives married soldiers of the regiment to stay there, and then with the approval of the commanding officer. I'm not going to say no more about that. Just be grateful that our wives could come with us. We had decent quarters, and they didn't have to slave over work in the camp. That is all I'm going to say on the wives. And I'd just like to say one more thing about it. What I've just said was written down. It's not me, so don't start shouting. Thank you very much. And that's all I can say is, sweets. Bye.